could first say your name and who you work with, what you do.
I'm Mustafa Santiago Ali, and I'm with the Hip Hop Caucus.
And your role at the Hip Hop Caucus?
I'm the Senior Vice President there in charge of climate, environmental justice, and community revitalization.
So you were formerly, I understand, the head of the EPA Environmental Justice Program. Can you talk about what happened there and why you left?
Oh, I left the Environmental Protection Agency where I led the environmental justice work. A couple of reasons. One, because I felt that the new administration had a different set of values and priorities than myself. And what I mean by that is the choices that I saw being made and being proposed were going to have devastating effects in our most vulnerable communities. Sometimes folks say frontline communities, environmental justice communities, and I knew that that couldn't possibly be right, because many of the protections that were in place, those communities were asking for them to be expanded so that they were actually more protective of their communities. So there was a rolling back and a proposal of rolling back regulations that had been in place for decades now. And then when I also saw them starting to cut the budgets for the programs that are necessary for communities to have the resources they need, the technical assistance and the information, I knew that that couldn't possibly be right. And I decided to respectfully stand up and say, I gotta go.
So even before these recent rollbacks and proposed rollbacks, in terms of environmental justice and frontline communities across the country, so many people, can you talk about who's being impacted and the fact that, you know, so much is needed to be done and even not...
So when we talk about frontline communities, when we talk about environmental justice, we're talking about communities of color, we're talking about low-income communities and working-class white communities. We're also talking about indigenous populations. And you can go across the country and find environmental injustices that are happening. In Flint, which everyone knows about the impacts of lead that have happened there, and how as a young person, when you're impacted by lead, it follows you throughout your life. Makes it more difficult for you to learn, makes it more difficult for you to be able to get employment, and then causes some other choices that may have to be made when you can't actually find work. We're talking about Standing Rock and indigenous populations and the protecting of our water quality and the impacts that happen in that space. We're talking about the Manchester community in Houston, Texas, where when you take a breath of air, you feel like you're breathing in gasoline fumes. We're talking about Mossville, Louisiana, who have been exposed to dioxins. We're talking about folks in New Orleans and Gulfport and the impacts from storms that are coming, and they will be more intense because of the climate change that's happening. We're talking about Detroit and the Marathon refinery that's there. We're talking about Barrio Logan in California and the issues that they're dealing with trying to get diesel reductions from the emissions that are happening. We are talking about communities in Appalachia with mountaintop mining and also with chemicals being spilled into the water, like at Elk River. So we're talking about America, and that's why it's so important for our president to actually go out and visit these communities before you start making decisions. Spend some real time with folks so they can explain to you the challenges that are happening in their community, but also the opportunities that exist. So you have the opportunity, Mr. President, to be someone who actually makes positive change. Why don't you build communities up instead of tearing them down? Let's build bridges instead of walls.
Even before this current administration, though, what was enough happening for people's health in those communities and across the U.S.?
The answer to that is no. There was not enough being done. There was progress being made, but there needed to be even more progress. And that's why we cannot roll back regulations. We can't roll back the budgets, especially for our most vulnerable communities who need the assistance. They need the help. They've been fighting to get traction. So we need to make sure that we're moving forward and not backwards.
So how do we build bridges and expand the environmental movement to include people who are being most affected first?
Well, we're starting here today, and it has been going on where people are building coalitions and people are beginning to come together who have been in silos before and saying that we are all in the same boat now, so we have to make change. People are going to go back home after the march, and they are going to get engaged in the political process. Some folks are going to run for office and be authentic in that space. Other people are going to make sure that they're holding folks accountable. We're also going to be focused on a just transition, making sure that we are creating the right types of jobs inside of communities so that we can move away from fossil fuels. So there's a lot of action, there's a lot of innovation, and I'm just excited with what's about to happen.